opportunity to ask you to do that, to put this over so that I have an opportunity to review the engineering reports relating, at least to my district. But I think in a broader sense, I know this is a challenge for all of us on the council because of the impact of state law, which limits the ability of the police to use radar enforcement absent updated traffic reports. And it is a thing that is going to have to be fixed at the state level, to be sure. I introduced legislation to do that, to try to provide an opportunity for local government to conduct hearings, public hearings, and to make a decision that would be different than that compelled by the engineering report when there's reasons for public safety that the local jurisdiction decides. Unfortunately, state law continues to handcuff us in our ability to do that. So for now, I'd like to have the opportunity at least to review the engineering report so that I can come back on behalf of my constituents and talk to you in greater detail about them in the future.
Great, and thank you for putting that legislation together up there. Many of us appreciate you doing that, and we hope somebody picks it up and runs with it and makes it law.
And so far, we haven't had very much success, sadly, and I think it's something that the public is really going to have to rally around as we try to move Sacramento forward on this, because you know, I think very often what happens is there's a focus on the science of setting speed limits, but often the scientific analysis doesn't take into account the realities that we all know exist in a particular community, in a particular neighborhood, and only the people who live there, have businesses there, represent those areas, often know better than what the engineers might be able to tell us.
Thank you, it makes sense to me as well. Colleagues, anyone want to talk to our colleague before we ask the DOT?
Who was your biggest opposition in Sacramento to this? The Auto Club, small cities, Central Valley?
It was, in fact, the Auto Club and the Teamsters.
And the Teamsters.
Yeah, strong.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, whoever, want to tell us what this is?
Hi, I'm Officer Troy Williams. I work Valley Traffic Division. I am the radar coordinator for Operations Valley Bureau, and it's my job to work closely with the Department of Transportation and the community to help facilitate the speed limits, the engineering traffic studies, and I work directly with them. Well, the one thing I wanted to touch on real quick is the misconception that I hear every time I come to a public forum, as the kind lady said here, we don't want to raise the speeds. The speeds aren't being raised. The speeds are already at their critical. The 85th percentile, we've already discussed that in the past. All we're doing is proposing that based on the results of the study, that's dictated by law, state law, that this is where the speed limit be set. There's been studies, we have a study that shows that regardless of how high you raise the speed limit or how much you lower it, the speed remains fluctuate the same within a mile per hour or two. So the misconception that we raise it from 35 to 40, everyone's going to go 50, as the gentleman Steve here said, is actually been proven not to be accurate.
Can you enforce the law right now out there?
No, that's the other thing I was going to say, thank you, sir, was one gentleman mentioned here that we're not enforcing the speed limit at all. That's because we legally cannot enforce the speed limit on Riverside Drive because the survey is expired. And via electronic means such as radar or laser, we cannot enforce the law. And our Deputy Chief Moore, now Assistant Chief Moore, has made it clear to our officers in the Valley that we're not going to go back to unsafe measures of chasing motorists and matching their speeds, because when we do that, we put the citizen at risk longer and the officer. With the technology of radar and laser, we can efficiently stop this higher level of speed efficiently and quickly. And if the speed limit is raised, now we can go out and do enforcement, but right now Riverside is illegal to enforce with electronic measures.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for that.
Hi, my name is Brian Gallagher. I'm a Senior Transportation Engineer with the Department of Transportation East Valley District Office. And the Transportation Department is here today to provide support for the Police Department to do the necessary traffic engineering studies as required by state law in order to allow them to resume enforcement or to begin enforcement on certain streets using either radar or laser enforcement of the speeds. For most of these speed limits, they've already been in place for either 7 years or 10 years, and they've expired, and so a new study was necessary. When we do the new study, we We send people out every quarter mile or half mile with radar guns and measure the speeds. And then we look at all the speeds that we got for that street, and we determine what the speed is that 85% of the drivers are traveling at or slower. And that's called the critical speed, or the 85th percentile speed. Once that speed is determined, then we're required to round it to the nearest 5-mile increment. So if that 85th percentile speed is, 42 miles per hour, we round it down to 40 miles per hour. If it's 39 miles per hour, we'll round it up to 40 miles per hour. We're allowed to reduce the recommended speed limit by 5 miles an hour in 2 cases. One, where the accident rate is determined to be very high on that street. People are already driving at a certain speed. The high accident rate shows that they're not successfully able to drive that street and getting into a lot of accidents, so we can recommend that the speed limit be reduced by 5 miles an hour. And that's something that we always look for when we do a radar study. Something else is where there's a combination of the potential for objects in the roadway, either people backing into driveways, pedestrians, bikes, even deer, combined with the reduction in visibility, either by a hill or by a curve, or even by shadows from underneath an adjacent freeway overcrossing. And then if there's limited room for the drivers to maneuver around that, that's something that we want to protect the drivers from and ask for the speed limit to be reduced by 5 miles an hour.
Mr. Gallagher, what's the speed limit in Burbank and Glendale on Riverside Drive? Is it the same? Because I think if it could be the same there, why can't it be the same in our town?
I don't think it's the same, but they have the same laws to stand up to as the city of Los Angeles does. And when they get around to doing their speed limit, they have to follow the same process that we do. So if we increase or decrease ours, it may be consistent with theirs for today, but in a couple of years when theirs expires, they're gonna have to change theirs as well.
Should we get state law that says 35 miles an hour on Riverside Drive?
No.
What would you recommend?
Well, I'm recommending that, one, we follow the law, and two,
Well, we make the law, so we want to change the law.
we have to follow the state law, and within the law, that we do our best to meet the needs of the community for that street, wherever it is that we're studying it. Rather than have a one-size-fits-all solution, though, for the entire city, the transportation works with the neighborhood councils that are involved with each street that we're studying. And we always believe big traffic, big streets, little traffic, little streets. And so we take the type of street that we're working on into consideration. If it's designed as a major highway or secondary highway, we treat those a lot differently than if it's a local street going through a neighborhood. Now, there was a study by the Federal Highway Administration in 1992. It produced some very interesting results that were kind of counterintuitive to our regular thinking. The first myth that they exposed is that raising speed limits increases the speeds. The reality is that drivers are going to travel at the speed they're comfortable with, regardless of whatever the posted speed limit is. From their study, they found that whether you increase the speed limits by 10 miles an hour or you reduce the speed limits by 10 miles an hour, the before and after critical speeds, the average of those speeds changed by less than 1 mile an hour. So whatever the speed limit is, the people are going to travel the speed they feel comfortable.
Brian, here's what we're going to do. Mr. Chair, we're going to continue this.
Yeah, we
It's
got
study.
it now.
But I think, we give them a little sense of what we want to come back with. I think people want a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. Knowing this street well, even outside my district, there's some parts that it becomes a raceway. It becomes a raceway when you encourage it. So we'd have to somehow try to get legislation that does this. Because safety is the #1 goal, correct?
The problem, even though safety is the #1 goal, the problem is that study also found that if you set the posted speed limit too far away from the critical speed, it actually causes an increase in accidents. As the posted speed is away from the speed we're driving, accidents increase.
I'm wondering if